Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Welcome back to Houselights. Our director, sorry, I'm picturing myself yelling at the computer. I'm sure it'll work.
I'm gonna win the bet.
What? No, the bet is that we have to. Yeah, no. Who knows? Oh man, I was almost gonna try it in another browser, and then it's like, reminder, you have to use this browser. So I'm like, all right. I'm gonna move this screen so John is off my window, so I can't. There you go. That's much better.
Hurtful.
Yes. Welcome back to Houselights, our director discussion show here on the Nerd Party Network. Today, we're continuing in the House of Gerwig with her 2019 retelling of the Little Women story. I am Darren Doe Moser, and I'm joined again by my friends John Joe Mills and Tristan Toe Riddell. Gentlemen, this is going to be an interesting time as the three males of us discuss Little Women. And I think it's also the first time for all of us with this movie. So it's going to be a very interesting discussion. The discussion that the internet has been waiting for. Just kidding. Not at all.
But this wasn't your first time in watching or reading this story, correct?
Correct. I've never read the book, but the 1994 version of this movie, or I guess the story, as it were, was a staple at my wife's house. She has two younger sisters, so they lived practically the Little Women. I mean, aside from being set during the Civil War. Besides that, exact same.
Did anybody get scarlet fever?
No, I guess one of them didn't die, and the dad wasn't in the army. But besides all of that, it was exactly...
Well, he did say that there was two other sisters, not three. So, I mean...
Well, I'm just trying to establish how relatable a story it was for
No,
Mrs.
apparently
Sci-Fi.
very, very relatable. And I could see a lot of, just that. One of the things in this movie that definitely comes across is that sisterly camaraderie. I mean, that is a major aspect of this whole movie and how they're acting with each other, how they're sniping at each other sometimes and hugging each other moments later. But yeah, so I had been aware of had seen, obviously, the 94 movie several times. And that brings an interesting point to this movie because it is in a different category. I don't have exactly a name for this category, but meaning movies that touch on something that is that definitive classic. And not that we don't want to see more of that same story, like we just had it with Dune. Okay, bad example. No one was saying the 1980s Dune is the definitive classic. But on that point, this movie was coming back into that type of story. So that was how I was introduced to it. What about you, Tristan? So I'm assuming you have not seen this before, but you do have a daughter and a wife. So did you feel the Little Women connection?
I'd never seen any interpretation of this, and I think there's something like 7 versions of this, something around those lines. I know like 5 have been nominated for Oscars, something like that.
Yeah, they started adapting this like real early into the talkies era. Didn't they? Like, I mean, it was pretty early on.
Yeah,
I think it was like 33
and a 60s, 70s version. There's been a lot.
Yeah, but I never read the book. I never saw the 1994 Winona Ryder Christian Bale version. And when I told my wife this, she was like, "What? How is that possible?" No, and like she's read the book several times. She's seen the 94 movie several times, and so as we were watching this. Because this is her first time seeing it as well. Like, we watched it together.
Oh, I'm glad you watched it with her. That's going to be exciting.
Oh, yeah. We watched it together. And there's actually, after 5 minutes, after the first 5 minutes, she like leans over, hits the remote, hits pause, and she's like, okay, they're Tarantinoing this for some reason.
Yeah, we'll talk about the temporal modifications of this story eventually, but yes, it was I like to say they're mementoing it, but maybe Tarantino is a little less insulting.
No, Memento is pretty, except for going backwards. I mean, but like the splitting up of the timelines. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is, I'll go ahead and I'll put it right out there. I think it makes it a challenge to plug into the movie emotionally at the beginning, because it is jumping, and like I haven't had the opportunity to build a real emotional connection with anybody before it starts jumping. And as a result, I think it does a very interesting thing of making it a more intellectual exercise, at least at the start. And I think it's obviously a very conscious decision on Gerwig's part, how she approached the story and how she flipped stuff. But it put me in the mindset of, as soon as I plugged into that being how it was going to be done, I unfortunately mentally went down the rabbit hole of, okay, I'm paying more attention to how the palette and the lighting cues are changing as we flip back and forth.
The blue, the orange, yeah.
Because I really wanted to make sure I was tracking with when the flips happened, because the switches, Gerwig, I think, makes a very bold choice in not making it very apparent when you've suddenly shifted gears. It's very jarring at points where you're like, oh, wait, okay, I'm back now.
Sometimes it's better.
Now I'm forward again.
I mean, there's a few moments where she falls asleep.
Well, until you discover that rhythm. But until you discover that rhythm,
that's true.
It takes a bit to get in there.
I was the same way with it, where it was jarring at first, because like it was that moment of almost like made me blink kind of thing, where I'm like, wait, what's going on? Like, what are we doing? Well, and then, like John, like you said, like you start to see the cues here and there, like the color changes, their clothes, and then of course later on you get Ronan's chopped off hair. Like that's an easier way to do it, and it's it was challenging at first, and I don't know. I guess I'm not saying it right straight up that it was a negative right off the bat, but from my wife's perspective, who is very much knows the story, it's a little bit harder. Like, she had more criticism of it than I did, because of knowing the story. And when she told me about like, oh, what the original story kind of sounds like, I was just like, oh yeah, I'd be upset by that too. Like when she says, with Jo publishing her story or getting something published, like that's a big deal at the end. Like you're building towards that.
Right.
And
it's
with Amy being in France, right. It's not the framing device. And with Amy being in France, like that's supposed to be a big reveal that she's going to France, not Jo. And so I feel like as a first time viewer, I feel like we were kind of robbed of those big emotional moments. But if you knew the story, if you were raised on the story, you could go a little bit more like, oh, okay, I can see what they're doing here.
But do you think that is a smart decision on Gerwig's part I mean, it's a dangerous decision, because it feels to me then that, and it felt to me through it, that there was an assumption that I'm coming to it familiar with the material already.
Right.
So that, yes, your wife might have that moment where she goes, wait a minute, okay, hold on, I know how this goes, and it's going different than, whereas the three of us, I mean, me, this is my first encounter with the material. Who hasn't heard of Little Women and stuff like that? And it's actually, forgive me, there's a great moment on a Simpsons episode from the past where you find out that Mo, the hard-hearted bartender, reads stories in a shelter, and then, one of the times you catch me goes, they were no longer little girls, they were little women. And like, that's what I think of whenever I think of Little Women. But, I think that maybe there is that baseline assumption of, well, this is old material. This would be like somebody coming to Dracula and being like, how do you not know this already? How have you not seen a version of this already?
And I think with it, it's kind of that situation of Gerwig saying, because there's been so many friggin' adaptations, even if we're late to the party as first-time viewers of the material, I think it was definitely a creative choice, and it was a bold creative choice to flip it around to do something different. And it would have been very easy for her to just do straight linear, like everything else, like every other adaptation. But she had to stand apart. And this is one of the, again, I'm not saying it's positive or negative, but I think this movie was very well received, and holy crap, did it make money.
I would offer, actually, because Darren, you mentioned Memento. It is like Nolan approaching Batman Begins. We still got Batman's origin story, but he baked it in a different way, where it wasn't the same sort of like, okay, we're building to that inevitable moment. It's like we jump around in Bruce Wayne's life. I'd say that the discussion to have really is about, once it settles down. I mean, Darren, you're familiar with the material before this, right? Was it jarring for you the way it was for Tristan's wife?
Yeah, I mean, I was in the same boat where I was leaning on my prior knowledge to make sense of it, because especially in the beginning when it's like, oh, are we in the past? Are we in the future? The other big difference in the 94 version is they use a different actress for young Amy. And so that makes it, well, they're not jumping through time, but that also, there's a kind of a key moment when you switch to Kirsten Dunst, who plays older Amy in the 94 version, and you feel like, oh, a period of time has passed because it's no longer a little girl. So this one is also just weird because for 2019, you have Emma Watson, who is, it's weird because I'm watching her and she's playing a young girl and eventually like a mother at the end. So it's this big range for an actress that doesn't change very much. But yeah, ultimately I did find myself leaning on just where the story was and what I knew. And then it was more like checking the boxes, like, oh, and here's where Laurie does this. And oh, here's the burning of the hair and the cutting of the hair and all of that. So it got better, but it was a rough first 30 minutes.
I will say I'm glad you mentioned Laurie, because I'll be, I guess, the controversial one here. I don't think Chalamet was the right choice. Much the same way in Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, Keanu Reeves plays Jonathan, and I see Carrie Elways come on screen. I'm like, you got the right guy right there. What's going on here? It's not that level. I think Chalamet performs the role correctly, but there's a certain type of charisma missing from him that makes me believe in Jo falling for him. She's so independent. She's so sure of herself. And it might be the linear thing messing with my perception of Laurie, because I see him be a jerk with Amy in France and a lout and everything before I get a chance. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the back half of the film that happens where I go, oh, that's the guy I see Jo falling in love with. I get that. I've gotten to know him as sort of a jackass before that. And I think that speaks to also the way that the chronological treatment being jumbled up. I needed somebody else in there with a type of charisma where even when he's being a jerk, I would understand why somebody would swoon for him. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense, especially when you're talking about the chronological aspect. But at the same time, I feel like that's not Chalamet's fault with that aspect. I feel like if it wasn't for that aspect, I feel like you might not have that criticism.
True. True.
But then again, I mean, this is the movie, so it's a valid criticism because this is the movie that we're presented in the way that it's cut. I personally didn't see that. Like, I mean, no, I totally agree with you with like, oh man, like he was a jerk. Like, why would I be invested in his journey with Jo, in his friendship with Jo? Like, why, like knowing that he's a louse and he's a jerk to Amy and, makes an ass of himself and everything like that. I guess it kind of makes you wonder, like, okay, well, where did he fall? Or was it because of Jo that he fell and everything like that? And it was, I thought Chalamet did a very good job. I thought that was, and also, I mean, that bone structure, how can you not fall for that bone structure? But, speaking of Chalamet and performances, like, good Lord, like I only knew that Saoirse Ronan was in this actually no, Saoirse Ronan and Florence Pugh. Those are the only people that I knew that was in this. Like I hadn't really, didn't remember any trailers. I didn't remember any posters really, and people just kept coming. Like as we were watching the movie, I was just
Laura
like,
Dern
it's Saoirse
shows
Ronan.
up, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's Laura
Like,
Dern.
I actually, when I saw Chris Cooper, that's when I threw my hands in the air. I was like, who else is in this movie?
Right. Oh, and he's always such a delight to see. He inhabits that role so well, and I think that he's got a real the way he embraces that role. I think it is so good, and for the rest of the cast, like that's the sort of charisma I'm looking for. And I think you're right. I'm pinning too much on Chalamet, but it's almost as if Cooper becomes that anchor around which all of these other great performances can revolve. And maybe that's what I was looking for with Laurie. Was I wanted them, I wanted him as a part of that system more than Chris Cooper's role.
But he's a different generation, though. I mean, you on one end you have like the Laura Derns and the Chris Coopers, and they're going to play those kind of roles. I mean, for me, I think when Bob Odenkirk showed up, I'm like, okay, anybody could walk on screen at this point, and I would not be surprised.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Bob Odenkirk. I think he's a terrific actor. I think that his career taking that turn because somebody had the wisdom to cast him as Saul Goodman in Breaking Bad. I love the opportunities that's given to him because he's proven himself time and again as a great actor. But to your point, when he walked on, it's almost distracting at that point to be like,
I would not have cast him as
star of the
March.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was okay. I'm glad that you prefaced all that, John, because I feel the same way about Odenkirk. Like I've been so impressed with his career from way back into his early comedy days and sketch comedy days to the dramatic roles that he's gotten, and then he like even dabbled in action star status. I mean, it's been amazing seeing his
Nobody
career.
was a good movie. That was a good movie.
But this was like not only his appearance was strange, I just didn't get it. He didn't fit. It just didn't feel like he belonged in that world. It was so strange and foreign to me. It was just like, oh, I'm not seeing Father March, even though I've never seen a version of Father March before. I'm seeing Bob Odenkirk. Like when he's laughing and when they're at the dinner table and they're laughing, I'm like, oh, Bob Odenkirk is eating a meal. Like it's just, so I think his performance was the only performance where I was like, this is weaker than it should be.
It's like Brad Pitt showing up. It's almost too big for the role at this point. And you're kind of like, I'm taken out of it. Not that he's not a good actor. It's just not Father March.
I don't even know if it's a situation of too big. I think it's just too foreign.
Yeah,
to the world.
This is a very clumsy and probably terrible example, but it is in a lot of ways like when Harvey Keitel shows up in a period piece. And you're like, I love Harvey Keitel, but not now. This isn't right. I think that, but to shift gears and go over to praise, Tristan was teasing me before we started recording that I don't have the same love of Meryl Streep's career as others do. I'm more critical of her arc and her appearances than others are.
We can't even use the phrase that I used. We'd have to bleep it on how you feel about Meryl Streep.
Untrue. Don't you dare try to get me Little Women canceled, okay? But like she was actually delightful in this. It was one of those things where I was like, oh, maybe I've just seen the wrong Meryl Streep roles because she disappeared into Aunt March. Like I lost Meryl Streep.
I really liked her as Aunt March.
I don't know if it's because she changed her body language sufficiently. I don't know if it's because she changed her speech patterns enough, whether the way they dressed her up or whatever, but everything came together for this perfect alchemy. I was so grateful for her because I thought she was a terrific character to illustrate the competing social forces that the girls are contending with. Like they have their own little like safe nest at home. And then Aunt March is that representation of sort of the social expectations that are coming for them.
Yeah, you got to
And
get
I thought
married.
Streep
You got
did
to
such
do
a
all this.
terrific job of illustrating that. And so while Bob Odenkirk was a distraction, Meryl Streep, I think in terms of the balance, I would say that you actually had a terrific actor in here who probably could have played Father March, and that's Tracy Letts, who worked in Lady Bird with Gerwig as the dad. And it's like, maybe that's too expected to make him the dad again, but man, he would have been so good in that role. He would have been so right. So right. He's great where he is in the film, but I almost wish they had inverted him and Odenkirk.
That would have been, yes, I could totally see that. I could totally see Bob Odenkirk as Mr. Dashwood.
Yeah. That
man.
I would buy. Yeah.
That's a delightful switch. Yeah. But that might have felt like stunt casting though, having Tracy Letts as the dad again with Saoirse Ronan.
That's true.
As the daughter.
It's a fair criticism of the idea, but
if this movie existed in a vacuum, I think that would have been a solid choice.
I think who gets forgotten most likely is Eliza Scanlon. You want to talk about a thankless role?
Yeah,
Joe's
Beth
the main
is
character.
a blip in this.
Florence Pugh gets to play the scene stealer. Everybody's like, oh, look, Hermione. And then Eliza Scanlon is playing this very subdued role. And that, I think, is also where the structure sort of hurts, is I didn't feel her loss at the scale that I wanted to. I knew I should have felt worse about what happened, but instead it just felt inevitable because I was jumping around and I was like, yeah, okay, she's going to die. And it's like, I didn't want to approach it like that. I didn't want to feel that way about it.
You mentioned The Simpsons. Now I'm thinking of like Friends, where Rachel and Joey are snipping at each other for spoiling books, and she spoils that Beth dies, and she has to like take it back because Joey starts to like cry. He's like, Beth doesn't actually die, does she? Yeah, I think you lose some of that because of the nature of not telling it as linear. I mean, I remember, for Beth dying in the 94 movie, not to keep comparing, but to compare, it's like Littlefoot's mom dying. It's like, it's a 90s moment, and it comes and it happens, but it is very impactful for anyone who's watched the 94 version. And yeah, it wasn't quite the same. And also because it kind of cuts away. Like, she comes down and she's not there, and then it's like match cut to the funeral, and I'm like, oh, so we missed all of the emotion. That's gone.
No, but it's even weirder than that, though. It's even weirder because, like, we're supposed to have this big emotional moment, like when Joe goes downstairs and she sees her mom, and her mom just kind of gives her that look like, oh, she's gone, and they start crying together. What did they do with the body? Joe was in the bed with her. Did they lift her up and say, like, no, she can sleep?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember in the 94, I believe it's, and I could be misremembering this, but I'm pretty sure it's she comes to her as to kind of like rouse her or wake her up, and discovers that she's passed. And it's like a very tender moment, and you don't get any of that in this. It's just kind of like she dies off screen, basically.
Well, it's unfortunate because I think, again, we keep harping on the structure sort of thing, but it's like, if I were more invested in the flow of the story, I wouldn't sit there, and when you, Tristan, said, well, what did they do with the body? I wouldn't sit there and go, oh yeah, I'd be like, oh, you heartless monster. This is such a big moment. Who cares? But you're saying that. I'm like, I had the same reaction where I was like, well, yeah, why didn't they wake her up when she's somewhere in the house, right? Like, or did they throw her out the window?
Yeah, I was going to say, is she out back?
Yeah. She's going to start stinking. Better get her back.
She went to a farm upstate, and she's okay. That is okay.
That's the thing, is that, like, I shouldn't be thinking these things when I should be feeling something else. Like, don't make me think logistics when I should be just working off of pure emotion, because you could have had that moment. Like, it would have even been even more impactful, like when, Marmee goes up to wake up Saoirse Ronan, or just to check on Beth, and then all of a sudden, Joe wakes up to her mother bawling because her daughter's dead. Anyway, it was just such a weird weird moment. And I at first I kind of liked the going back and forth between her first getting scarlet fever to then getting a fever again to when she died, because like it showed the possibilities of shifting timelines, of like building up, like making a dual timeline create a singular moment. I thought that was really well crafted and well edited, even though it made us lose some emotional resonance. I felt like it was an interesting exercise.
Well, my question though legitimately becomes: we're sitting here, we're offering these viewpoints on it. So whenever we have a conversation and it sort of like goes a little bit like this, you all know by this point that my brain is like, but it got Best Picture nomination, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress. The performance stuff I can reason out. It's the Best Picture one that I struggle with. I know awards shows mean nothing, but there were a lot of accolades for this. The Writers Guild named this as one of the greatest screenplays of the 21st century so far. And there's legitimately, it's a weird moment because I'm like, what am I missing? What am I not getting? What do I not understand? Why? I can look at this and I can say, flash forward here, right? All of these problems we're talking about almost ameliorate themselves in like the last 30, 40 minutes of the movie. Like it found a rhythm I could really plug into in the last like 30 to 40 minutes of the movie. It's just getting to that last 30 and 40 minutes. Do you think it's literally just the fact that the ending was strong, and so people sort of bias themselves toward a more forgivable attitude for something that ends, quote unquote, correctly, ends strong, that they forgive sort of the missteps of the earlier acts of the film?
Yeah, it's...
Well, I'm trying to think, because to me personally, I didn't really feel like it ended that strong. I felt like this is so rare. This is so absolutely rare. But I felt like the second act was the strongest in the movie. And oftentimes the second act is where it kind of peters out. Like, because usually, movies have a strong, beginning where it kind of it builds the world and it draws you in, and then it establishes the plot, and then it just kind of meanders as the plot continues. And then the ending has your, rising action and climax and moments of decision and things like that. But with this one, I felt like, I don't know, just kind of meandered to the ending. I felt like it was, and also just like when we get to the point where Joe is negotiating with Mr. Dashwood, I was just like, oh, is she not playing Joe anymore? Like, I was like, she didn't feel like the Joe March character. She is like, oh, she must be playing the author. She must be playing Alcott right now. And, Gerwig said that she kind of was, but at the same time, I was like, I'm too taken out of it. Like, I'm really all of a sudden I feel like I'm in Never Ending Story.
Yes. But see, I thought that was the intent.
Good callback.
So maybe that's why I was forgiving of it, was I was like, oh, okay. This whole thing I was watching was just her conceit, her story made up, right, for the book and everything. And so I thought that was a good enough spot to land, as I was like, oh, this was all the story of the sisters and the life and everything was the magic trick. Like the prestige is like, but guess what? It's really the author telling us a story the whole time. And I'm like, oh, okay, that was pretty clever. I mean, maybe that's why I was okay with it. But
I did not like the ending as well, because it cast that doubt of, is this just a story? Did this actually happen? Is this really their life? Or is it just, especially with the very, very ending where she's like, oh, and she didn't get married. And he's like, oh, no, they need to get married. And then they do. It's like, but in the book, they do. That's the actual ending. Like, she does go to him and stop him from going to California, and they get married and all that stuff happens. So why would you say, oh, her original intent was not that they got, like, that was very confusing to me.
Apparently there's extra contextual knowledge to that, which was one of those things where, like, I didn't know this until I looked it up, but apparently Alcott didn't want to end Little Women that way. And because it was released in parts, kind of another Dune reference, kind of like Dune, where I think the first half was released, and then she was working on the second half. and then her publisher said like, okay, yeah, no, she's got to get married to Friedrich. And she's like, well, I don't know. She's her own person. She's going to go on. He's like, nope, it's got to be this way. People are going to be too upset. And so she follows through, just like in the movie, but in real life.
So, but see, you know what though, replaying it in my brain, I get it now. Where it does mismatch is you could take this as all of the sad stuff is like the reality part, and then like the orange colored happier stuff is the story part. So like you're seeing her real life, while the happy stuff is what she invents for the story and everything, except for the fact that you have Amy break the boundary between the two of them,
right,
in a way that makes it not work. That's the structural problem with it.
Your European stuff kills that.
You're right. Yeah. Okay.
Well, and there's,
Okay.
I do know one of the
I get it.
differences in this version to the 94 is that Greta Gerwig did look at other sources besides just the book. She was looking at diary entries and other things. And I think that's what probably gave her the idea to frame it in that kind of literary selling the story. But yeah, it was a weird turn at the end of just the casting doubt on, again, what is real, what happened, what didn't. That I do want to say on a positive note, I think, and this probably is strongest to just the story in general of Little Women. Little Women has a lot of very invested moments in it. Like when, oh man, every time, like when they go to help the family and they're going to get sick because of it. Or I guess I knew because I knew the story, but like, where they have the fight and then she falls through the ice. And just so there's a lot of key moments that Little Women packs a punch where you're just like, oh man, like you want them to do well. You want them to succeed. And life is just throwing these hardballs at them. And they're trying to adapt to it and move from, girlhood into womanhood and marriage and life and all of that. So those are all still there. That's the story. That's not necessarily how it's constructed, but yeah, the choice to wrap all of that in a non-linear narrative and a future framing device, and and to play all the actresses at the same age, relatively speaking, that is just what gave us this version. Which again, we've said this is one of many. I also just want to say it's an interesting aspect in the fact that I'm wondering, how did Greta approach telling the story? Because you're kind of telling it to two audiences. You're telling it to ones that loved the 90s version, and it is like their heart. And you're telling to people who have no idea who this is, and they don't care about the 90s, and they just want a new story. And I think it's a hard thread to balance, because you're not necessarily dethroning, but you're telling a new tale on a beloved classic. And that can be very difficult to not make it look like, oh, I changed everything, or, oh, I'm going to, they're all going to shave their head. It's going to be completely different or something like that. But what did you guys feel for that? Did you see, were there moments where you felt like this is kind of trying to tell its own thing? I mean, obviously neither of you have seen the 94, so it's kind of hard to contrast, but
I feel like for me, one thing that was super obvious that it was trying to be its own thing was some of the European stuff, where with Florence Pugh as Amy talking to Laurie, where there was this, I thought it was a cool scene, but at the same time, I'm like, this feels really modern. It was when she was talking about what it's like to be a woman during that time. Again, I thought it was a great speech. I thought it was well played. I thought it was well acted, especially knowing that it was written just like a couple minutes before they shot it on handwritten notes. Apparently, it was Meryl Streep's idea. She spoke to Greta Gerwig and said, there needs to be something in this scene, like in this movie, that gives audiences contextual knowledge of what it was like to be a woman in this time. And so it's a little, what's the word I'm looking for? John, what's the word I'm looking for when something is out of its time.
Anachronistic.
Thank you. So while this speech was well done, well written, and well performed, it felt anachronistic. Just the way that she was talking and how she was, everything was spot on. But that one felt like, oh, this is Greta Gerwig. This is truly her writing style here.
It's interesting because that's right. And what is something that every film that's set in a time period struggles with is getting the characters to quote unquote sound right in the time period. And while I agree with you that speech in specific, it's like, oh, okay, this is a modern person saying what it's like in a modern way. At the same time, just to turn it into a compliment sandwich, as the kids say, one of the things I actually really like about
do the kids say that?
When you're 83 years old, they're all kids.
Oh, it's true.
But I actually really liked a moment when Saoirse Ronan was talking with Laurie, and she goes, "Oh, that's capital." It was the first time I've heard somebody use a phrase like that from that time period, where it sounded in a naturalistic fashion. Usually, when people use slang from an era, you can tell that it's somebody like, I don't know why they're using this word, but I'll say it. It's capital.
Yeah. Wrong.
And whereas
right word,
she said
wrong
it the way
phrase.
that we'd say, oh, that's so cool. And it's like, yeah, that's how people would have said it. Right. But that's the way I imagine somebody would have delivered it back. Oh, it's capital, right? Like they're not going to make a big deal of capital. It's just like saying, hey, that's cool, And but how could you see? That's one of those things though, where I consider that an odd choice, because Streep is correct that, hey, and that's a great director listening to their seasoned actress saying, I've done this sort of thing before. Trust me, you need something like this. Director listens, works it in. Absolutely the correct choice. That's a smart director. But it's a director moving too quickly who doesn't say, that is a great idea. We'll shoot it tomorrow.
Spot on.
But is that just a function of Gerwig's inexperience by that point? That's an indie director who does a 90-minute film. That's how you put it together. Somebody doing a period piece needs to shift gears and say, I'm in a bigger production. I have another day where I'm going to have a camera set up like this. We'll come back. So it might just be a function of the fact that this is film number 2 for her. And she just, or later, she might approach that decision differently.
And this was her first studio film with studio money. And which is fascinating to me because just this got me thinking, like, apparently she had a conversation with Steven Spielberg, which you can do that when you're running those circles. She was talking with Steven Spielberg about like, hey, like I got this chance to do Little Women. What do you think? And he said, shoot it on film. And I think that was a very, very smart thing to do because like she wanted to shoot Lady Bird on Super 16, couldn't afford it. But with this huge period piece, she can afford it. They shot it on 35 and it totally works because it's a period piece. Like whether we notice it or not, subconsciously we do as an audience because we feel when we see film, we think older. When we see digital, we think newer. And it's there. It's ingrained in us. It's almost an evolutionary thing. And
she's just gone black and white even farther into the past.
And it was strange to me because there was a few times when I saw some they're not cigarette burns, but like I can't remember what they're called, but like little white flashes here and there, like that you can
Extra
see.
grain.
No, it was like an imperfection in the film. There's a term for it, and I'm completely blanking on it. I hate that I'm blanking on it. Schindler would be so disgusted with me, but
he is. I promise you.
Like,
I mean, she originally wanted to shoot the film vertically on an iPhone, and I'm glad for one that she didn't. But
yeah, Spielberg told her to shoot it on a film. Soderbergh is just like, shoot it on an iPhone. It's totally easy.
Yeah.
But no, I thought that was it's so great. Like when you look at the direct, like if you were able to divorce yourself from the nonlinear storytelling aspect, which is admittedly hard to do. But we, the three of us, were clearly in the minority when it came to that. when you look at what she achieved with what she got out of the performances, what she got out of the costume design, the editing, the production design, the color timing, just like so much of it is so well directed. And I didn't know until I looked it up that this was nominated for Best Picture, like John, like you mentioned. And so, holy crap. So her first solo film nominated for Best Picture, and she was nominated for Best Director. This film's nominated for Best Picture, but she wasn't nominated for Best Director, and that pissed a lot of people off. And then Barbie comes out, and not only is that nominated for Best Picture, it makes over $1 billion. You know, like, holy crap! Like this woman has
and
done.
then she gets talked about on Houselights. Boom, boom, boom,
Boom, boom, boom.
Truly, her career has meaning now.
It's just amazing. Like 3 pictures in a row, and those are your only pictures that you've done, all nominated for Best Picture. That's amazing.
We'll get to this when we talk about Barbie, but in all honesty, a trajectory like that, I know everybody would say I'm nuts for this, but I honestly think the smartest decision for her is just to stick to producing, because the long knives are there. Like, you've used up all of the any kind of graces you're going to get from the world at large. Just make the money at this point. Just make the money. Be an overly involved producer.
Like, and I'm retiring from directing. No, it's The Dark Knight all over.
Well,
like,
she's writing the Snow White live action remake for Disney, but she is not directing.
Ooh.
I think that is the wisest possible choice, because the film after Barbie, she needs to give that time. Otherwise, people they are ready to come after her right now.
Several years. Yes, she needs several years to cool off.
Yeah,
because she deserves all the praise. But John, I totally hear what you're saying.
People are always ready for the fall. People want to see failure, because
people want to see Schadenfreude.
Yeah, it makes people feel more important when they can criticize somebody who has achieved so much.
Then they sit down and on podcasts and just rip movies apart. Those people. Terrible.
Those people. But and just as a quick aside though, I will say that I understand people's frustration with her not getting like a Best Director nomination and everything. It's a pain that I remember all the way back to the late 90s. When Baz Luhrmann didn't get nominated for Moulin Rouge. I was outraged, and I'm not saying that to be glib. I'm saying
I know
that
I agree with you.
Falling out of love with the Oscars as any measure of greatness started. It took a while, and I think that was one of those ones where that was like, I might have like gotten up and tried to keep fighting after that, but that was like the death blow. I had so many cuts by that point, and then like that one, I was like, oh, come on. Like, that was nuts. But like, what is it about the Academy that they don't want to get it? I'm firmly of the belief that if you get a Best Picture nomination, director should be bundled in there, because the director is the person who brought it all together, for God's sake.
Although there's 10 in the Best Picture slot and there's 5 in the director slot. So you can't bundle like that. But
I say those
are the rules they just made up. So
that's bull S. That's bull S. They should just
30 nominations per slot. Everybody gets in, and everybody's not happy. But
I was that way when Ridley Scott lost for Gladiator for Best Director, and it won Best Picture. But at least he was nominated. You know?
Yeah, that's true.
And I think with this movie being so well received, this has a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think there was like 2 guys who didn't like the story structure like we did and tanked the 100%. Or at least 2 guys who were willing to admit it. But I saw some very valid criticism as to why, like, I think so many people just in this past Oscar run were saying like, oh, snubs don't exist because, like you have to admit that somebody else who was nominated didn't deserve it. I think that year someone didn't deserve it. And that was definitely, what's his name, who directed Joker.
Todd Is it Todd
Phillips?
Yeah.
Yeah. He like I no, and I'm a fan of the movie. I'm a fan of the Joker film. I wasn't in love with it, but I thought it was well done. Totally didn't need Best Director, especially over Greta Gerwig.
Joker is one of those ones that works against. Well, obviously the director brought something together, but it's like Joker really is a film where it's like if you took Joaquin Phoenix's performance out of it, that's an okay film at best. It's like there's nothing dynamic about the structure, and Gerwig at least deserves credit for saying, I'm going to try something different from what people expect with a period piece. And as a part of that, because we're getting so close to the end here of our own discussion, and obviously I'm lifting this from Wikipedia, her quote that she went to the composer, and I always murder this guy's name, so please forgive me, Alexander Desplat. Is that how you pronounce his name, the composer?
Sure.
Desplat, whatever. There are people here on the Nerd Party. Lee, give me a call. Let me know how I should pronounce his name because you love him. But he said that Gerwig described that she wanted the music to be, and this is a quote I'm pulling here, is a mix of Mozart meeting Bowie. So I want to ask specifically, did you guys get that sense from the music? Was there anything special about this music where you were like, hey,
No.
This is great?
I can't remember a single bar.
Okay, I'm not alone then. Okay, cool. All right.
But it wasn't bad. It felt like
It didn't take me out of it.
music.
Yeah.
Yeah. The electric guitar didn't kick in during the, future scenes, but it worked.
Okay. Yeah, it's...
That would have been funny if the future scenes were all synth and we're like, oh my God, we're in the future.
Some
not
say it's the
rejecting
color
that.
palette. It's really
No.
the music that tells you what time you're in.
I'm not rejecting that because Last of the Mohicans has synth and it completely works.
Be like, oh my God, is that Daft Punk?
We all can't be Last of the Mohicans, okay?
That one was lightning in a bottle for sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, yes, we're rounding third here. It's been an interesting discussion because we've had pros, we've had cons. We talked a lot about the Academy. We rarely do, but we did a lot in this regard. And so, yeah, let's circle around for final thoughts. And Tristan, I'll start with you, but I also want to know, were there any other words of wisdom from your wife, especially having seen the 94 version and also being female on this one?
Oh, yeah. She hated what they did with Friedrich. She really enjoyed in the book and in the 94 version how Friedrich was portrayed as older and someone who was truly just wanting to inspire her. And apparently this was news to me that Friedrich was the entire reason why she got published. And they really built up that relationship through the entire not the entire movie, but like once she met him, and then like they really built the relationship. And when I saw this, and then they tacked on this romance at the end, I was just like, am I supposed to give a crap about this? Like, am I supposed to want
really fall in love
her to
with
chase
that
after him
relationship in the 94? Yeah.
And I felt like I was robbed of that. And then like I like my wife talks to me about it. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds much better. And then I find out that the reason why Gerwig minimized it was she wanted Jo to be kind of the author of her own destiny with getting herself published. I was like, okay, I can totally get along with that. But that doesn't mean that you have to throw it in as an afterthought like Alcott was made to do. Like that's what that scene with Dashwood at the end was referencing, was that, like, oh, well, like the publisher made her have Jo marry Friedrich. But at the same time, like, I get why you're doing it, but you're making a crappy romance out of it. Like, this is the end of your movie, and I don't care. And I don't have extra contextual knowledge to think that it's a wink and kind of cool. It's just a bad romance. And so to me, I thought that was a real clincher for me. So I think, to me, like, with all the positives and with it being so well received, it had a $40 million budget. It took home 218 and 95 on Rotten Tomatoes, nominated for Best Picture. I mean, great performances. This really connected, but just for me personally, I didn't connect with it. And there was just so much where I was just like, am I supposed to care about this? I don't. Maybe I'm not the right audience. I don't know. I give this one a 3. I mean, as in I liked it, but it has its issues.
No, I think that's well put. What about you, John? You have some Little Women in your life as well. Did you see any connection, or just have they shown any interest in seeing this? I'm actually kind of curious.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Not
They
their
interest in seeing
not
this
their
at all.
boat.
Yeah, I kid. My middle child actually loved it. She asked me, what I thought of it, and I talked to her about it. She was scandalized, but then I was able to adequately and accurately say, "You just have a crush on Timothée Chalamet." And she said, "Shut up, don't." I said, "Aha, there's my proof that you do." Because it's the whole reason she saw Dune Part 2. I'm with Tristan, 3 stars. This is a director who, again, confident, can tell a story, and in a technical sense, the color palette management, the performances that she gets, the management of things, although time is a little bit of an enemy to her in this case. I see somebody where she was much more comfortable with that hour and 30 running time than 2 hours 14. Like it felt a little bit like the obligation to have an epic historical tale got the better of her storytelling sensibility, but it's still a director that I see demonstrating, and the box office clearly qualifies her to direct a big tentpole film. You get a big return on that. It's like, congratulations, you made it to the big league. Let's give you a turn at bat. But this is I can at the very least look at this and say this is a well-managed production by a director who's able to communicate clearly to crew and cast what she wants done, what she needs done, and to appear on screen. But it's an intellectual exercise without the emotional aspect for me. So it's a 3.
No, yeah. I like how we've done really well on pros and cons. I mean, obviously this movie was not meant for us. We are not the target audience remotely, but yeah, I think I can give it a 3 as well, just across the board. It isn't a bad film. I almost kind of want to see a re-edited linear version, which you would probably have to almost cut the entire framing device because it would kind of get lost in that, or maybe just the very beginning and the very end. And maybe that would shave off 15 minutes to just kind of make it a shorter story. I'd be actually really interested in seeing that, because maybe your emotional connection grows progressively rather than back and forth. I think, you really struck me, John, when you talked about the running time, because we hadn't spoken on it. And I think, especially because of the time jumps, I think that is really the main reason it is so long, because you kind of lose momentum and you have to reacquire the story every time you jump. And I think you could easily shave 15 minutes off if you were just telling it straight across. I think that's kind of a side, it's just a response to doing a story like that. I think you lose that ability. But all things said, I'm sure someday when my littles watch this, my daughter will enjoy it as well. And although my wife will probably raise her on the 94 version even more, this was definitely, that version was one that they probably ran the VHS tape into the ground. So as Tristan would say, a family favorite, to be sure. So yeah, I think we're going to give it 3 across the board. It's been a really interesting discussion about Greta Gerwig, and I'm really looking forward to next week, as we've alluded in her short run as directing. Greta's even more going to the big time as she jumps to 2023's Barbie here on Houselights.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.